Upgrades. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another JVS movie review. Today, I'm bringing you what could be the last film in the Mission Impossible franchise. And this one is Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. Here's a quick synopsis. Ethan Hunt and the IMF team race against time to find the entity, a rogue artificial intelligence that can destroy mankind. And this is directed by the man, Christopher McQuarrie. He's directed the last 4 of these films, starring Tom Cruise, Ving, Rhames, Simon Pegg, Hayley Atwell, Issei Morales, and Angela Bassett. Now, this is kind of a direct sequel. This is the first time we've seen this in the Mission Impossible, where we had Dead Reckoning, which came out last year, I want to say maybe 2 years ago. Dead Reckoning came out, and this was supposed at one point be called Dead Reckoning Part 2, because they split that film up for this final installment here before they changed it to The Final Reckoning. So this is almost a pickup direct sequel to Dead Reckoning. And we are reintroduced again to the entity who we first ran into in Dead Reckoning. And we saw the destruction that the entity was able to cause then, along with Dead Entity possibly being the best action film of 2023. I want to say it was the best action movie of 2023. Definitely a top 10 movie of that year. And here we turn with the longest Mission Impossible film, possibly the most bloated Mission Impossible film. While granted, we are at close to 3 hours long with this movie, yet the action is a really steady pace, but it does feel pointless a lot of times in the film with the amount of action that you get here. But again, we're just reintroduced to Ethan Hunt and the IMF team as they are trying to find the sub that helps kill the entity, but also come up with a device that helps its original source material help again destroy the entity. That's the whole purpose of this film. Again, it's kind of odd because you're coming off of Dead Reckoning, where the entity has already been established as a threat. Issei Morales' character is also established as a threat. So you already come in knowing these things. And for that reason, you kind of question why it feels at the beginning of the film repetitive as you're overly explaining what the entity is all over again, almost setting it up as an excuse to say, if you possibly didn't see Dead Reckoning, this is why we're here. So it feels like you're repeating a lot of steps of Dead Reckoning to get to the conclusion of The Final Reckoning. But again, it's a Mission Impossible film. In all honesty, that's what you're here for. With this one, it's connecting the dots over the Mission Impossible universe, as we connect dots from Mission Impossible 1 to this Mission Impossible, which is, I think, possibly more fan service than actually service to the plot, but it still works. It works enough where it keeps an audience intrigued. At this point in the Mission Impossible franchise, there's no way you can say I'm in it for the storyline. I don't think that's been the case since Rogue Nation. They've really set that in place of like, we're going to give you an amazing story to go along with this. With these two Part 1 and Part 2 films here, which means you really have to view them as one whole 5.5 hour long movie. Between these Part 1 and Part 2 here, though, while the storyline is complete, it just feels so bloated. This film has at least 40 minutes of scenes that are unnecessary in it at times. And I think that can take an audience out of it. The positive part is it is so well paced for 3 hours that I never felt like I was in a movie theater for 3 hours. Like, I've seen films, action films supposedly, that are 3 hours long, and you feel 3 hours, or it gets so repetitive at times that you sense that you've been sitting too long. The first hour to hour and 20 minutes of this film, while it does feel disjointed, it's so quick. It's hit after hit after hit. But the problem is it also doesn't give those scenes time to breathe. So you rely more on charisma of Tom Cruise to push you through about the first hour of this film, as they're just overly explaining things again with the entity and explaining what the threat is here. And that's another issue here. This is about to be the first Mission Impossible film where there's not a physical threat here. And when you don't make it a physical threat, even though Issa Morales is a villain in this film, he's not the big villain. And everyone knows he's not the big villain. So when the big villain is a computer, it can detach the audience away from feeling the connection necessary to move the plot forward here. And then as it pertains to Ethan Hunt, Tom Cruise, it's more of the same here. We do see a more battle-tested Ethan, and that could be something that the audience could latch onto. Um, Hayley Atwell, who's taking over for Rebecca Ferguson as like the lead female of these Mission Impossible films. She does an adequate job in the role. It just feels at times like they're trying to shoehorn a romance in between her and Ethan, and that does just not work at all. And then we get the normal ones, the ones we are looking forward to always seeing in the Ving Rhames and Assignment Pig, and they are just as good as always in it. The only issue, and it's not a small one, with Final Reckoning, it's length of time. Again, it is about an hour too long. 40 minutes to an hour too long in this film here. And at times the action feels, while never repetitive, it feels unnecessary or just super unrealistic. It gets to a point with Ethan and a sub, and that's all I'll say, that at this point he might as well just be a Marvel hero because the stuff he does is not realistic at all. And I know you don't necessarily tune in to Mission Impossible for realistic stuff, but some of that scene borderlines on like Tomorrow Never Dies of Jane Bondish things when you got the ice castle and stuff like that. Like it gets that level of cartoonish with its setup and its action at certain points in this film. And I think that's what takes you away from enjoying this one as much as you, if you saw it, enjoy Dead Reckoning. Like Dead Reckoning was almost the perfect film. It is a great movie. And here you just get if the people who make Mission Impossible films decided to make a Fast and Furious film. That's what the Final Reckoning is here. It's long. It's bloated. It has stunts and scenes in it that are as far from reality as humanly possible, even for a Mission Impossible film. And when you take away the elements, I think that people really, really look forward to for Mission Impossible films, I think that you can pull that older audience away while it feels like this film is trying to gather up new fans. Now, there are some new interesting characters here. Characters that you wonder if this is the end of Ethan, will we see these characters move on here? And that's another thing we need to talk about, the end of Ethan Hunt. It's not shown at all in this film exactly what the fate of an Ethan Hunt could possibly be in the Mission Impossible film series. But it just feels like a conclusion just because of the way the premise is set up. The flashbacks to the beginning, it's a lot of talk about the length of time that Ethan Hunt has done things, and it's a lot of talk about the prior Mission Impossible films and the stunts that he did, or the actions that Ethan took to save the world. All of those are brought up again, and that's what's making people believe this could possibly be the last Mission Impossible film. But the way Tom Cruise is running around in this film, you kind of say, you can at least give you two more of them. His charisma is just enough to get you to forget how silly at times the action is in this film or the setup of certain plot points is of this film. And when you get over that, maybe you get a more enjoyable film. Or it could feel like a conclusion, like the way that Daniel Craig Bond's movies ended with No Time to Die, which I thought the same thing. It was an overly bloated film, but it's still a solid watch. And that's where you fall into, for me at least, with Dead Reckoning is a bloated film, but a solid watch. If you're in it for Ethan and Tom, you're going to get Ethan and Tom. You're going to get a lot of them in this film. And I think that can really take you out of it. As, again, for the first hour and a half, you are really kind of questioning exactly where the action is going. You don't necessarily question where the story is going because you fully understand what is being placed in front of you. But it is so quick at times. And it just feels like, hey, one scene, around we're here, around we're here, around we're here. Like it feels like that for about the first hour. to hour and a half of this film, and that is not the most enjoyable thing to watch. But when the film calms down, what you get is a really good Mission Impossible film. The last 40 minutes of this film, the third act of this movie, right after one of the most silliest moments happened in Mission Impossible's history, this becomes like possibly the best action movie you're going to see. If that last 40 minutes was the rest of this movie, I don't think you could touch how great Final Reckoning can be. Unfortunately, you have to sit through well over 2 hours before you get to that last 40 minutes. And because of that, it just takes the film down a peg. So, Final Reckoning, currently in theaters, out of a possible 10, I'm going to give the Final Reckoning an 8 out of 10. This is a step back for the Mission Impossible universe. This is around, I like Mission Impossible 3, Rabbit's Foot, which amazingly is something else brought up in this film. But it's really out that feel of the Mission Impossible films. It does not match anything else. It does not match 4 and up, but it is square on a level matching Mission Impossible 3. If that is a Mission Impossible film that you like, I think you will really like The Final Reckoning. If that, like a lot of people who feel that's a Mission Impossible film that's on the lower end of it, I think that's also the opinion you're going to walk away with it. It's long. It's a really long film, but it doesn't feel that way because of the pacing. But some of the scenes just feel pointless. And that's what's going to be hard for audience to get over. But check it out. Let us know what you think. This has been another JVS movie review. Peace, people.